Trudian from Retrofit One and ADU One and now Balcony One. Thank you for tuning in today. The reason I'm here with you all is to discuss ADUs, but more particularly, I wanted to discuss something very important, and that is Senate Bill 721 and the corresponding Senate bill for condominiums. But I think I'm going to focus more on Senate Bill 721 because that's more geared towards apartment owners and not HOAs. So I'm happy to do one on HOAs a little bit later for our property management clients. But for the time being, I would like to speak to all of you landlords out there on the internets. So my name is David Tashrudian. I know it says Helen Fowler here at the bottom of the screen, but I'm just not technically savvy enough to be able to change that. Now, usually I'm able to share my screen, and I will do that. It looks like I do have the ability. So I'm going to share my screen with you right now. We'll go through a brief presentation, and I've got the chat overlay open. So if anyone has any questions, you can just put that in the chat. I'll be happy to answer those questions live. All right, so here we are sharing my screen, and let's get right into the presentation. So this presentation is going to be, like I said, about SB 721, the exterior elevated inspection requirement. Again, David Tashrudian with ADU 1 and Balcony 1. Balcony 1 is a new division that we've slowly but surely been rolling out in order to do inspections of exterior elevated elements as well as the construction when required. So you can find us here at retrofit1.com. Soon you'll be able to find us at balcony1.com. And as always, you can find us at apartmentadu.com as well. Let's talk about what Senate Bill SB 721 is. So according to SB 721, all of your balconies and decks that are known as exterior elevated elements need to be inspected every 6 years starting in January 1, 2025. These exterior elevated elements are common features in most multifamily buildings in California. So a lot of you might own multifamily buildings with balconies, with decks that protrude from the building envelope or walkways and things like that. So whatever exterior elevated element that's made out of wood framing and is over 6 feet tall, meaning 6 feet off of the ground must be inspected. And we'll talk a little bit more about what portions of those structures must be inspected. So we drew up a little diagram here. This is in some of our materials. It'll likely be on our website, identifying exactly when you're going to have to do a SB 721 or an SB 326 inspection. But again, we're just focusing on SB 721, but the inspection timelines are the same. Okay, so let's start here on the very left, your building. So if you have a building with 3 or more units, you're going to have to, with wood framed exterior elevated elements that are 6 feet above the ground level, then yes, you will have to have your building inspected. If your building is less than 3 units, however, no inspection is required. Or if these exterior elevated elements are made out of steel, then they don't need to be inspected. Or again, if your exterior elevated elements are not above 6 feet from the ground level, then they also don't need to be inspected. So if you have any questions about whether or not your building must be inspected, I would take a look at this flow chart. Really easy to read, very legible and informative. All right, so SB 721 is going to require the inspection of the exterior elevated elements along with the associated waterproofing elements and the load-bearing elements. So if you've got a building with more than 3 units, a multifamily dwelling, it must be inspected by either a licensed architect, a licensed civil or structural engineer, or a building contractor holding B general license or a C5 framing license, or an inspector who is certified as a building inspector. These inspections must be carried out by January 1, 2025, and every 6 years after that. So the rule is, hey, you've got an exterior elevated element that must be inspected. You've got until January 1, 2025 to get it inspected. Once you do get it inspected, you hold that report if there's nothing wrong, and just get the just get the building inspected subsequently in every 6-year increments, which isn't terrible. So the SB 721 provides definitions rather of exterior elevated element and associated waterproofing elements, as well as load-bearing components. And these are the definitions here. Essentially, an exterior elevated element means all types of structures and their supports and railings that can be described as balconies, decks, porches, stairways, walkways, and entry structures that extend beyond the exterior walls of the building, and which have a walking surface that is more than 6 feet above the ground. So again, if you look at pretty much any building in Southern California, Northern California, San Diego, it's got 2 stories or more, you'll probably run into at least one exterior element, whether it be a balcony or an exterior walkway to access the second story units. You're going to have an exterior elevated element that must be inspected. What also needs to be inspected are the waterproofing elements, including the flashings, the membranes that are covering the exterior elevated elements, the coatings, this is like Dexotec and stuff like that, and all sealants that protect the underlying structure from the elements like rain and snow and stuff like that. Although, we don't get too much rain or snow here in Southern California. In other parts of the state you do, and the state wants to make sure that all of those waterproofing elements are in good repair in order to ensure that the structural elements holding up those balconies and other exterior elevated elements do not deteriorate, decay, and cause the risk of failure. The question then is, what are the load-bearing elements that also must be inspected? Those load-bearing components are those components that extend beyond the exterior walls of the building and deliver structural load from the exterior elevated element to the building. So these are the joists of a balcony, for example, that extend beyond the building line. These are also the columns that support the balcony or that support a railway and deliver the load into the ground. All of these must be inspected as part of the inspection report. So what happens once you have your inspection report and the inspector identifies a condition that must be remedied? So if the condition is such that poses an immediate threat to life or safety, then you've got to make that repair within 45 days. So once the inspection is undertaken by the engineer or the architect or the contractor, they've got 15 days to deliver the report to the owner. Once the owner has that report in hand, the owner, depending on the severity of the condition, has either 45 days, like I said, if there's an immediate threat to life or safety, and you've got 45 days to remedy the issue. And if there isn't an immediate threat, but there is a failure or the potential failure in some of the waterproofing elements or the structural load bearing elements, then you've got 120 days to make the repair for these non-emergency repair situations. Here is a job that we were just called out to inspect. You can see here the lower balcony on the lower right hand. The lower balcony rather. There's 2 of them here, one on the top, one on the bottom. The lower balcony on both where the railing is at both the middle and on the right hand side is failing. You can see that it's deflecting and sort of starting to sag in the middle in both areas. This is an indication that there's something wrong and that the balcony must be inspected. What's likely happening here is that there was, and you'll see in the next slide, a breach in the waterproofing that has allowed water to enter into the structural member, into the cavity rather, where the structural members are housed, essentially inside of this soffit that's covered by stucco, and the water is slowly but surely, because water does that, deteriorated the wood, caused wood rot, and led to the deflection in these balconies. This is a very dangerous condition. If it's not remedied, these balconies will eventually fail. Here you can see that there's a crack in the waterproofing element. This is the deck. And in this deck, you can see the crack is fairly large, in some areas over an inch, allowing for water to seep through. And this is the cause. So in order to remedy this, we'd have to expose the underside of the balcony. So essentially strip away all of the stucco that's there, expose the framing and see what's going on. If the structural members are compromised, we'd have to replace them, sister them back into the building 2 feet or 2 times what they're protruding, 2 times the length of what they're protruding. So if this is a 4-foot balcony, we're going to have to replace these beams 8 feet into the structure, and we're going to have to fix the decking and the waterproofing to ensure that this doesn't happen again. Here are some examples of exterior elevated elements aside from the one I just showed you. These are balconies, pretty common. You can see there's rails. What we do here and flashing. What we do here is we inspect visually with the railing, the flashing, the waterproofing, as well as the structural components. And you might wonder how we inspect those structural components. What we do is we make a small hole on the underside, and we use an endoscopic camera. So I've got a brand new one here from Rigid. And what we do is we take this camera and attach to it this head. So as you can see, this head is relatively small. It's less than an inch in diameter, probably half an inch. And it can fit into small crevices. So we attach the camera here to the snake part of the camera, rather, here to the camera itself, and we sort of fish it through and look around to see if there are any compromised components. I've got a really long extension for this, making this up to 9 feet. So all of our technicians in the field have been equipped with this technology, so we can make the inspection relatively, relatively non-invasive, so that you're not opening up too much stucco so that you have to make an extensive repair. Really what we try to do is open up a very small area and fill it with a grommet so that you can come back and make the repair or make the inspection again in the future. Here's a depiction of a deck. A lot of buildings we see in Northern California and San Francisco area have these decks. You can see these posts here. These are the load supporting, the load bearing elements. These have to be inspected, as well as these wooden rails. A lot of times these wooden rails are in extreme disrepair, and these railings will have to be replaced. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've inspected buildings and noticed that the railing particularly is in disrepair. Yeah, you can see it here. Stairs and landings and these wood frame structures are prone to decay. This entire structure must be removed and replaced. I mean, what we would like to do here in a case like this is replace it with steel members, with steel stairs and with steel stringers and composite treads, so they last a lifetime. It might be a little bit more expensive, but you can ensure that it'll be safe and it'll last pretty much the lifetime of your building. Here's an example of walkways, very long walkway here on the second floor. This entire thing will have to be inspected. We'd probably inspect every 6 feet in order to ensure that this walkway is properly Dexotect, properly waterproofed, and is not failing. What happens how do you waterproof something? So what you do is essentially you strip it down to the framing, install new plywood, and then once the plywood is down, you put some bithetane down with waterproof sealant, and then you cover it like you do here. So you can see the underlayment on the left and the finish coat on the right. There are some examples of our crew doing the waterproofing and then the lath on the bottom in order to install the stucco. That's the finished product. Here is the load-bearing element for this finished product. We had to install a new HSS, hollow structural section, steel column that is attached to the steel stairs with a new footing. You can see the footing here, the concrete footing, and the steel up and supporting the stairs. That's about it. So, I thought I was going to talk about ADUs, but you guys have heard so much about that from Helen. I thought I'd take this opportunity to speak to you about SB 721 and the requirements of the rule. So I appreciate everyone's time today, and thank you for listening to us. I don't see any comments in the chat, so I think we're done with today's presentation, and I'll leave you with that. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to us. I'm sure you have our contact information. Reach us at retrofit1.com, at apartmentadu.com. You can call our office, 844-RETRO1. Anything like that. Any questions, rather, just give me a call. Happy to help. I'm here every day. Talk to you soon, guys. Bye-bye.